Yes.
Welcome, folks. I'm Byron Zahm, your host today for Admitted, Advice on College Admissions and Testing. With me are my faithful guests, Jessica Bush out of New Jersey, and also Chris Lean all the way from sunny California, San Diego. Great, Chris?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Well, today's topic is about accommodations, specifically accommodations for the ACT and SAT testing. Now, standardized tests like ACT and SAT are standardized, except that there are exceptions, and those exceptions we call accommodations. And accommodations really are meant to help provide additional accommodation for students who have unique learning, uh, sometimes called disabilities, sometimes called exceptionalities. And it's to give them the opportunity to demonstrate what they do know and what they are capable of. And so there's a variety of accommodations that we'll talk about, but we want to talk on a kind of a high level of what they are, what we need to know about those, because they don't apply for everybody. Okay. And we want to make that clear. So we're going to be talking about what they are not, who they're for, how do we apply, and what might happen if you apply and not get that accommodation accepted. So there's certain procedures that we need to follow. Now, in I'm not sure how long accommodations have been formally in place, but what I do know is that they are actually in compliance with the American Disabilities Act. So it's not something that, a testing agency can say, no, we're not going to comply. It's something that they have to do, right? Because we would need to accommodate those that need that. So let's talk about what those accommodations are. And Jessica, would you like to start us off
Sure.
to talk about what those are?
Sure. Thanks, Byron. Hi, everyone. Just on a very broad level, there are many different types of accommodations. Giving the student extra time is one of them. And there's different types of extra time. There's time and a half, there's double time, and the SAT and the ACT have a little bit different different types of accommodations in some level, which is why you need help from us. But the details are very detailed. So you could also, depending on the learning disability or the IEP or the 504 plan that the student has, I had a student that needed a scribe. That's the first time I had ever had that. So if you have a certain disability and you need somebody to write for you, on the paper test, there are scribe disabilities as well. There's wheelchair accommodations. There is sitting in front of the room accommodations. There's all different real broad level types of accommodation depending on the student's IEP 504 or quote unquote disability or challenge that they have.
Mm-hmm. So there are different kinds, as you mentioned. The most frequent request is time accommodations, all right? And there's various kinds, and it's different for ACT and SAT depending on who you are and what your particular situation. The second most requested accommodation, from my understanding, is location.
Yeah.
So, Chris, can you talk to us a little bit more about who these accommodations apply for?
Yeah, thank you, Byron. And that's sort of the the proverbial $64 question, right? It's $64 question in a free webinar. Sorry for the bad humor. But it is very important to understand, because a lot of times when parents or students hear about accommodations, and especially as you mentioned, the time and a half, 2x time, they're like, wow, I want that, and we get what we want. We will make it happen. Well, there are some preconditions. I also should say that for this very brief discussion today, this is mostly within the context of SAT and ACT. There are different types of accommodations for LSAT and MCAT, all sorts of other exams. So the student who would normally qualify for accommodations, number one, it could be a blind student who, as Jessica touched on earlier, there might be sort of a text-to-speech reader or something of that nature, and then their response to the questions will be different than your standard student, fully sight and everything. The other student, and sort of on the other end, is the student who has certainly all senses working as standard, but they may have, say, ADD, ADHD, they're on the spectrum, and it has to be documented. Somebody can't just say, well, I think my kid's got ADHD, so we just want accommodations, thank you very much.
Or I
That's not
woke
how
up
the
with a
process
headache.
works. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So really what happens then is you have to work hand in hand with a school counselor, child psychologist, medical professional, where there is at least some documentation or substantiation of really what difficulty the student is experiencing in their educational process, and how that sort of pertains into test taking. And then from there, that's where this information would be sent in. Usually the school counselor will opine, and then sent into the ACT or SAT. They will review. And whereas years ago, you really had to be in an exceptionality situation to have the accommodations. It seems in the more recent years, things have opened up a bit more. So, and you also want to make sure that you're applying. If you meet all the criteria, make sure that you are applying with as much time as possible preceding that initial test date, so that the organizations, SAT and College Board, will have enough time to review and hopefully approve. And in some cases, if you're denied, you can go back. There's missing information, or you can appeal that and sometimes win that. So you want to leave enough room in the process for yourself to achieve the outcome that you want and certainly is deserved.
Well, that leads me into the next question, and that is, how someone would apply. So it's not like someone can show up on test date and for any reason say, I need accommodations today, right? It has to be done in advance. But I'm thinking about the student, often that student will already have a 504, an IEP, or something like that, right? It's already documented. But let's just say in this particular case, the parent is concerned that there is something going on with their students. They don't have a professional diagnosis or something like that, and they are preparing. What would you tell a student like that, Jessica?
Basically, you have to have a neuropsych eval of some sort. You have to have documentation from a doctor. You have to have an IEP. You have to have a 504. You have to have something. You can't just go to your guidance counselor and say, I think I need extra time for my kid, and can you grant them? It has to come from a professional. A psych evaluation or neuropsych evaluation, even one of our really wonderful mind prints or evaluations is not doctoral, official professional documentation. So if they're planning on that sort of thing, they've got to start way in advance, way before junior year, in order to get that sort of accommodation. And what I tell families is extra time isn't always a positive thing. It can help some students, but some students it doesn't, to be honest. And the reason that it doesn't is because it takes what's now a little over a 2-hour test, right? And now the ACT, if you decide to add the optional science, it makes it a much, much longer test. So what I say to the kids is, you've got to get your head in the game. This is like a lacrosse match. This is like, a serious competition. And if you're going to have that extra time, you have to use the extra time. It used to be a long time ago when they can just, if they didn't need the time, they didn't have to use it. You have to use the extra time. So, it makes it extremely rigorous and tiring. To get through that last science section, after 3 hours is exhausting. So if your kid has the stamina to be able to do that, the extra time could help. If your kid does not have stamina and can't build up that type of stamina, it could work against them.
I appreciate the fact that you're emphasizing that this is a rigorous exam that you're taking, and it's not something that you go in lightly on. It's not something that you don't plan and prepare for. I mean, when I think about, the families that we've worked with, um, when they're trying to be approved or get approved for an IEP, for example, that process takes months, right? So 6 months, if you're thinking 6 months is going to be enough, you're cutting it way too tight for yourself. So this is something that you need to be spending at least 6 months to a year, in advance preparing for. And thank you also for letting us know that it may not always be in their best interest to
Yeah.
have extra time. So so your needs are unique. That's what we want to know and understand here. And by taking time with a professional, whether that's with tutor doctor or whether that's with a school counselor or a clinic, get the right help that you need. Chris, I want to ask you one more question here, and that relates to, now let's say someone's going through this process, they really feel they have a legitimate case right there. They go through the process, and let's just say their IEP is denied or the clinical diagnosis, doesn't go through. What do you tell a person who believes they ought to qualify, but they've just been rejected?
Yeah, very good information, because that does happen. Significant percentage of people, and it varies by locale, but there's a significant proportion of people who do not achieve the accommodations. First of all, it's not the Holy Grail. The accommodations are, if you receive them, it's just one step in the overall process. And stepping back, something Jessica said was very important. A couple things were very important I'd like to amplify as answering this. One, the old adage, especially for jocks and former jocks out there, you play the game like you practice. So it's very important to understand that if you are going to have the accommodations, once you've been approved, you can factor that into the testing process. But that still does not mean or replace solid underlying subject matter expertise and the test taking strategies and working on the pacing and timing. Those three things come together for test preparation, and it's very important to understand that. The accommodation, in many cases, again, if it's a time-based accommodation, that means you just have a little bit more time. But we often find the student who is awarded the accommodation, they still rush through the test. And so they're not taking advantage of the timing. And that's why you have to, whichever test prep company you work with, or if you're doing it on your own, you must incorporate the right strategy of how do I use this additional time? Complete the section, go back a second time, maybe a third time, but making sure that you're accurately answering the questions along the way. And Jessica had also mentioned that in many of these cases, when somebody goes through and properly prepares for the exam, time no longer is even that much of a factor. So if they're using it right during their practice, in their preparation, they will learn to use it right during the actual exam itself. They go hand in hand. So that's very important.
Yeah, I want to tie in with what Chris is saying, is that in the test prep portals that we use to prepare the students, one of the things that I show the student and the family when we're reviewing their practice test is, has the student taken advantage of the time from the accommodation that they have? So if it is now extended to, say, an hour and 10 minutes, are they finishing within an hour, right around an hour and 10 minutes, or are they finishing maybe on 50 minutes, 45 minutes, and they're not utilizing their time? So one of the things that we show and can utilize, the tools and the resources that we have, is to really clearly show the families and the students with their practice tests, here's what you need to work on. You need to work on giving yourself the time accommodation that you have and utilizing your time better than you are. And we know that that's when we know that that's something we need to work on in their tutoring sessions.
Yes, and when they have the situation that they are denied now that we've properly framed what the accommodations are and how to practice and use them, if they do become denied, right, there is an appeal process, both the College Board website and the ACT website. Hopefully your school counselors are fully on top of it, but there is an appeal process or a reconsideration process that can be employed. And many times you'll find out why it is that the request was rejected. So you can go back and see that. The second thing then is, in the end, if you don't have the accommodations for the ACT or the SAT, that's fine. All the more reason we really need to make sure that we own the subject matter itself and we understand the test taking strategies, because backing up, why do these exams even exist? Well, it's to test for college readiness, because the rigors of college are going to be fairly commensurate with the type of testing, the pacing of it, and the more critical reasoning aspect of an SAT or ACT being psychometric exams versus the typical multiple choice test in, 8th grade algebra. So that's why these exams are used. And if you don't get the accommodations, you know what? Just dust yourself off and proceed anyway, because as we said, many times students who are awarded them don't fully take advantage of them. One other thing I will mention is those who are parents of 6th, 7th, 8th graders perhaps that are watching this, welcome. But you also can start getting the steps in place if you suspect that you may need accommodations down the line. There are accommodations for even AP exams and other exams taken in school. And if those are awarded, it makes it all the easier to then be awarded accommodations for the ACT and the SAT exams because of the pre-existing history. So it is sort of a timeline approach. If you suspect something's up with your son or daughter's learning, well, then again, speak with your doctor. If there's any other medical professional involved, school counselors, great community of resources each parent has.
Well, listening to you guys as we wrap this up here, one of the themes that keeps coming through for me is this whole idea of pacing. Pacing, whether you have an accommodation or not is extremely important, whether it's too fast, too slow, or otherwise, right? Pacing. So we as parents, need to plan and prepare our students. Our students need to be doing those the same. So we're hoping that the information that we shared with you folks today about the testing accommodations that are out there and what they're for and how you might be able to appropriate them, that you'll take advantage of that. And we thank you for visiting us here on Advice on College Admissions and Testing. We appreciate you having you as an audience, and we'll look forward to more presentations in the future. Chris, Jessica, thanks so much for being on our channel here with some more great advice on college admissions and testing. Thank you very much.
How can they get in touch with us?
Well, what is that number, Chris? Do you have it off the top of your head?
Well, I do know tutordoctor.com. That much I do know. And if they go to that website, two things can happen. Number one, they can find that handy dandy phone number that you had just referred to, the toll-free number. Yes.
800-488-8677.
Yes, and at the website also they can look at our approach toward not only test preparation, but subject tutoring and such. And if you wish to contact your local office, you just simply have to put in your zip code and your local office will then be in contact with you.
And of course, you've got your great hosts here, Jessica in New Jersey, Chris in San Diego, and I'm Byron out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thanks so much. See you next time.
Thank you.